welcome to the Curley House. I'm Carol Matheson.
And I'm John Bowman. We're going to give you a tour and a little bit of history today. We walked in through the front door and we're now in the main hall of the James Michael Curley House on the Jamaica Way. The house was built in 1915 and it's about 7,500 square feet, and it has 7 bedrooms and 2 servant rooms and 3.5 baths. It's built in the Georgian Revival style. The architect was Joseph McGinnis, who was a young architect at the time. What you're looking at now are features of the house that were formerly in the estate of Mr. Rogers, Henry Rogers in Fairhaven, Massachusetts, and it just so happened that that estate, the main 85-room house, was being demolished at the time that Mayor Curley wanted to build this house. So he bought a number of architectural features of that house, including the stairway that you're looking at now, the dining room that we'll look at a little bit later, and many mahogany doors, which you'll see as we go through the tour. On the left is the living room. The first floor of the house has the entry hall we just saw, this living room, the breakfast room, which was the main dining area for the family, and the dining room and the kitchen. Upstairs are the bedrooms now being used by the Emerald Necklace Conservancy as their offices. There were quite a few famous people that came here during the course of Curley's time as a politician. I understand from the family that Eleanor Roosevelt was hosted in this room, and also the actress Sophie Tucker and the entire Vienna Boys Choir at one point were in here. Beyond the breakfast room is the rear door to the house.
The rear door was typically known for where the constituents who came in to seek different favors from then Mayor, Alderman, Governor of the Commonwealth, Mr. Curley, and they would be escorted out that door generally. They would come in through the front as we had, and in immediately into the library, so that they were kept away from the rest of the family in their private space. There's a lot of history as to who came in and out and why, and the various maids that would lead them in and rob Mr. Curley of his last nickels in those pockets. It was quite a rich heritage. This room that we're in right here, the living room, has been transformed from what it would have been in James Michael Curley's days, because the Junior League of Boston in 1995 created a show house here, a decorated show house. And what you're seeing are some of the features that the individual decorators put into the house. This is sort of hand-screened silk wallpaper, very, very decorative and typical of what you might have found in an elegant home at the time that this was built. The decorative items in the room are really just examples of what you might have found in the house at the time. The fireplace is one example also of the Henry Rogers estate that had been purchased by the mayor prior to the construction of this house, and it was inserted in here. It's quite lovely.
I think it's important to remember Curley lived in this house for over 40 years, selling it in 1956 or 58, and to the Oblate Fathers, which was a missionary organization. They occupied it for over 30 years. And then with the proceeds from the George Robert White Fund, the city of Boston purchased the house in 1988 and designated it a Boston landmark. What was unusual about that designation is it also includes interior areas of the house, particularly this hallway area, the stairwell going all the way up, the dining room, which is ahead of us, and the library to the right. So these are all also a Boston landmark.
The significance of this, of all of these features really comes from the fact that the house in Fairhaven, Massachusetts, for the Writers Estate, were designed, or was originally designed by a very well-known Boston architect, Charles Brigham. And he's responsible for, was responsible for one of the buildings of the MFA in Boston, which has subsequently been torn down, but he's also was one of the significant architects of the Christian Science Center in Boston, and numerous houses and properties in the Back Bay and other parts of Boston and Watertown, and actually throughout New England. He had quite an illustrious career. So the significance of this, all of these artifacts really are because of his distinguished history as an architect in the city. So it goes beyond the mayor.
So this was also in a room that Curley would invite people over, particularly Broadway-bound shows. He would invite the cast back here. On one occasion, I think it was the opening of The King and I, he invited the composer Richard Rodgers, that we know of from Rodgers and Hammerstein, back, and Gertrude Curley, Mayor's Curley's second wife, played for Rodgers the melodies from the show that they had just attended. Rodgers was amazed because he said, she had to play that from memory. We haven't published the sheet music yet. I thought that was fascinating. Another luminary from the time that Curley invited back here was the famous African-American dancer Bill Robinson, whose stage name was Bojangles. He was famous for appearing with Shirley Temple in 3 or 4 movies, one of which they did a famous dance called the stair dance, in which he tap danced up a stair. When Bill Rodgers was invited back here, he recreated the famous stair dance on these stairs.
These stairs also served as a backdrop for the wedding portraits of his daughter Mary, who was here married in the house, and made quite a trail in down the stairs. It was quite beautiful. And here we have a little hidden gem. This is an indication of the upstairs, downstairs quality of a home of this nature. We have an entrance to the servants' quarters. So they came off of the main hall, and what you see going down would be stairs leading directly into the kitchen. On the top here we have 2 bedrooms for the 2 maids that lived in the house and rotated over time. A small bathroom for their needs. So they were always accessible to the family, but yet screened from the family. So you can look at the difference really in the architecture between the 2 styles of living. Even Boston has an upstairs, downstairs in its history. This chandelier that you're looking at is actually kind of one of those interesting things. The first term that Mr. Curley was a representative to the U.S. House of Congress in the 1910, 1911, he was able to befriend someone at the Austrian embassy, and here we have a chandelier from the embassy, which marks the most dramatic point in this house. It's pretty significant. You can see the emblems of the seals of the Austrian government. It's all solid brass. It's quite beautiful.
So as we go upstairs now, we're on the bedroom level of the house. To the right would have been the master bedroom and master bath. Now being used as the administrative offices for the conservancy.
One interesting thing, we won't see it today, but in this master bathroom is a stand-up shower, which was one of supposedly the first of its kind in this region, if not country. Mr. Curley had spent some time in Europe at some point and discovered that they had these showers that you could walk into, and he wanted that installed in his own home here. So it was quite a feat at the time, and everyone was quite intrigued by it. As you look at these windows out along the Jamaica Way, you see the Jamaica Pond behind as a backdrop, and that's where you'll have enjoy the sunset every evening. And I think the architecture of the house just really shows that the way it was positioned was in its best light, so that you'll see sunset along this entire side of the house with all of the bedrooms fronting it. It's quite beautiful.
We didn't talk about the shamrock shutters that are on the
outside of the house.
But this area of Boston, the Jamaica Way, I think was laid down in about 1890, but was predominantly large estates owned by Protestant Brahmins, and it was quite a statement of Mayor Curley to put these Irish shamrocks on his shutters in what had been a bastion of Protestant Brahmins.
They interpreted it as we believe he meant it, which was a little bit of thumbing in his nose, which is quite. You have to envision that when the mayor lived here and his family, from between his first wife and his second wife, there were quite a few children that ran into this house. We have stories, numerous stories that have come in over the years of people in their 80s and 90s who have run into the house and said, I played here as a child. I came over here and I played. I had one friend of mine, knew her through an alumni association, and she came in here and she just squeezed her cheeks and she said, I slid down that banister when I was a child. So we focus on the architecture, the history of the house, we focus on the man, but there were children that lived in this house. There was a lot of joy and there was a lot of sadness. Many of these children predeceased the mayor himself, or James Michael Curley, but there was also a lot of fun and frivolity which happened. And this is something which is probably near and dear to every woman's heart. A real, honest to gosh, linen closet. Centrally located in the house. Of course, the maids could whip up and take out the linens and bring them off to the various bedrooms and bathrooms. And you know, these drawers would have come out, and I'm sure that they were filled with quite a few large tablecloths, sheets, linens, napkins, everything that you would imagine in a gracious home that entertained us to the extent that this house did and was known for. So we have extensions of bedrooms up in here, continuing into the house. This is one room now, which is transformed dramatically from what might have been the case when James Michael Curley was here. Clearly the woodwork and the wallpaper is reminiscent of the decorated show house from 1995. They had a passion for showing what they could do and make things look quite different from what they might otherwise have been. But these would have been bedrooms for children at the time. We think that Richard Dennis and his brother had bedrooms here.
Richard Dennis was Mayor Curley's stepson when Mayor Curley married Gertrude Curley in about 1936. She had two sons. She was a widow, and they moved into the house. That was Curley's second family in the house. And Dick Dennis tells the story that Mayor Curley would have Jamaica Pond stocked with trout once a year in the spring, and he would get Dick Dennis up at 4 o'clock in the morning and have him row the mayor out to the center where he would catch the first trout. You can see the Jamaica Pond out the window here.
So what you're looking at here from the second floor, you see the beauty of it, is the stained glass window, which was made for the house by a very distinguished artist, Charles Koenig, and it's signed in it. And what is so unique and wonderful about it is that it has the Irish cottage on it and the insignia, east-west, home is best, which is an Irish proverb that James Melville Curley, with all of his heritage, really felt very special. It was very important to him. And this window is again one of those interesting articles where, aside from the house and the history of people who lived in it, this is also an architectural statement that is of historic significance to Boston because of Mr. Koenig's work, and it's been well maintained. It has a beautiful medallion in the center, which at some point will reflect right down into the middle of the foyer, and it's quite beautiful at 6 or 7 in the morning when the sun is at its peak in May or June.
On our left, we're walking into the most ornate room in the house, which is 30 feet deep by about 20 feet long, 14-foot ceiling. It's the old dining room that came out of the Rogers House in Fairhaven. The mahogany carvings, the chandelier. Maybe you could speak a little bit about that.
Well, the chandelier is a wonderful chandelier, which, again, I think that is not from the Rogers House, but it's rather reflects James Michael Curley's Irish heritage. It's also finished with sterling silver, which we believe the Oakley fathers, in their desire to maintain things more easily, have bronzed over. But this is a wonderful crystal chandelier that was original to the house, and was probably refreshing all sorts of light and happiness through the many meals and festivities. We've been told, we have pictures, that there was a Christmas tree right in the center of the window every year, where children and toys would look to see if Santa had arrived. Carving in this room is really just beautiful. In this room, the house was built around the room, and it's quite a unique piece of construction. The fact that it could have all been taken out of one house and made into another with such completeness is quite a tribute to the architect who made certain, and the artisans who continue to install it.
Above the fireplace, you'll see something that ties the Emerald Necklace Conservancy straight to this Curley House. The original site plan that you're looking at here, here's the Jamaica Way, here's the front of the house, and here are the gardens in the back. This landscape plan was done by the firm of Olmsted Brothers, which was the firm of James Michael Olmsted, who designed the Emerald Necklace. Frederick Law Olmsted. So it's very fitting that the administrative offices of the Emerald Necklace Conservancy are on a property that was actually the site plan of which was done by the Olmsted Brothers.
It seems as though history has intervened to bring a lot of coincidences back to the house. The fact that it was acquired by the George Robert White Fund originally, who was known to, he was an employee of the city of Boston at one point, and when he passed away, he left a very large estate to the cities to use in their behalf. And it was James Michael Curley who used it for the establishment of all of the neighborhood health centers throughout the city. Fitting then that his fund was used to acquire the property in 1988, and now we have the coincidence again of the Olmsted firm plus the Emerald Necklace, whose mission is to maintain and preserve and enhance the beauty of the Emerald Necklace, built by or designed by Frederick Law Olmsted. So it's really nice the way the history has trickled its way around.
So the last room, which is designated as a landmark, is Mayor Curley's library, which is on the first floor, on the front of the building, is accessible off of the main hall and also the entrance hall. What we have here are photographs of Mayor Curley, family photographs of his two families here over the years. He had 9 children with his first wife, Mary, 7 of whom predeceased him. And then in 1930, Mary died in about 1930, and about 1936, he married Gertrude, and she was a widow with 2 children. Richard Dennis, who's seen here in the photographs with Mayor Curley, lived a very long and full life, and just passed away recently at the age of 95. Dick was instrumental in convincing the city to acquire the property from the Old Lake Fathers back in the 80s, and was absolutely thrilled when the Emerald Necklace Conservancy was designated as to occupy the house. He sincerely wanted the house to be used and to be open to people.
He's been in the house numerous times and has told so many wonderful stories about the house, and we only wish we could have recorded all of his stories so that they could be here for perpetuity. But his love for the house and his love for his stepfather was very profound, and he really tried. I would say the last 20 years of his life were spent trying to figure out how this house could be maintained in such a way that the people of Boston could continue to enjoy it. And as Mr. Bowman says, he's thrilled that it's the Emerald Necklace who will maintain that mission.
So the library was a place where Mayor Curley would relax. He was not well schooled, but he was well educated. He was very widely read, and one of his proudest possessions was his library, which to a large extent has been sold and dismantled. He also kept a number of scrapbooks of his political career, and he donated those scrapbooks to Holy Cross, where they are available for inspection. Mayor Curley ran 33 campaigns, political campaigns. He had a political life that stretched 50 years. He started out as an alderman, became a city councilor, a state rep, the governor, and of course the mayor of Boston 4 times. He didn't always win. He ran for mayor 9 times, and so he was defeated 5 times, but he did serve 4 terms as mayor, 4 terms as a congressman from Massachusetts, and 1 term as the governor of Massachusetts. On his last day as governor, he got married, I think, to Gertrude, his wife, and they walked down the steps of the State House, and then they went on a honeymoon to Italy, where they had an audience with the Pope, I understand. But Dick Dennis's mother, Gertrude, said, well, you know, I was First Lady of the Commonwealth for almost 2 hours. What's, I think, fitting is that this house was purchased by the George Robert White Fund. The architect of this house was, as we said, Joseph McGinnis, a young architect. He died in 1918 in the Spanish flu pandemic. And shortly after he passed, his wife and young daughter passed as well. In 1922, George Robert White gave, as Carol has said, a substantial endowment to the city of Boston. Mayor Curley, having witnessed the effects of the Spanish flu pandemic, the loss of his young architect, one of the first things he did with the funds from the George Robert White Fund was to establish neighborhood health centers in practically every Boston neighborhood. He went on later to greatly expand the Boston Medical Center, and is known for his public works and infrastructure projects during the Depression. And I would say that's his lasting legacy. The library was the place where where he would meet his constituents, and they would come into the house, be led into the library here. He would talk with him. He would occasionally pick up the telephone and make a phone call. If he could, he would always leave them with a silver dollar. And that was his legacy. You see his campaign poster, the mayor of the poor. While he held a number of public offices, he considered the office of mayor to be the most significant one that he held.
We mentioned earlier that there were 2 maids that would work in the home and would live in the upstairs residence. We had the pleasure of meeting actually the last 2 of the maids. The history of them was that as he occupied this house, he would invite young women from Ireland over to give them an opportunity to get ahead in life, to have a little bit of money, to save something, and to send something back home. And so there was a succession of young women that would come into this country. The last 2 were able to come back to the house. Both of them were in their 80s separately, but they came back to the house and could tell such wonderful stories about how the governor, as both of them called him, would regale them with laughter and would always be generous to everybody who came to that door. Virtually no one came to the door and left empty-handed. And that was his really largesse in life.